So the last 2 weeks, we've been in a series about the Bible, and essentially the first part was why should we read it, and the second episode was how do we read it. So today I'm going to dive into part 3 a little differently, and I want to start out by explaining that I've begun to ask people to send me questions that they may have about the Bible. It really could be any question, really. So I want to start out with the first question that I received, and it's a good one. It's a bit long, but that's okay. So the question is, why did God give us free will and then seemingly a lot of rules we're supposed to follow, which we can choose to obey or not? He created the whole universe, so why not make one where it's impossible to do anything outside of his design? Was the garden essentially something like that? So the best answer for this is really the simplest. It's a bit vague, so sorry for that. But ultimately, God gave us free will because he loves us, and he wants to interact with us, with him, and have a relationship with him. And he wants to really dwell with us, and he wants us to reciprocate that. But let's really dig into that concept of free will, because I think that's really important. If you're reading scripture, it's always good to really understand certain things that are, especially if they're throughout scripture. And of course, we know that free will is not only in scripture, but it carries on through all the way to our lives and going forward. So basically, free will is to choose. But free will does not mean to do whatever we want and whenever we want to. Free will does not imply freedom of action in a sense. So to simplify this further, I want to use an example that I hope will help. And I'm not saying that my example is perfect, so if you find flaws in it, I apologize, but I think it gives a good visual. So let's say that when my daughter was little, I offered her a treat, and I put in front of her on the table a cookie and a brownie. Now, I'm giving her free will to choose the brownie or the cookie. I didn't give her the freedom to do whatever she wants. Like, I didn't give her the freedom to go to the freezer and grab a pint of ice cream and eat that instead. So free will versus free choice, while they're different, they do intersect each other. And our choice can only be made successfully as long as that choice is in our control. So, for example, did you choose the year you were born? Did you choose your parents? The place you were born? If it's raining outside? No, we didn't choose those things, but we do have the free will to navigate the particulars of our lives. I hope that makes sense. And because God unconditionally loves us, he wants us to follow his will, which in my example of my daughter, his will, let's say, is the cookie. But he also knows that we are also presented with the brownie. And let's use that as the example of like not following his will. So let's say the treats I presented my daughter this time was a bowl of strawberries. They're delicious, they're healthy, they're good for her. And I know it is one of her favorites. So that makes me happy, and that would be my hope for her to choose. But then I also put the brownie in front of her. But let's say she's allergic to dairy. So essentially, the brownie is harmful to her. It would have negative consequences, and she knows, and I know, that the brownie would taste good, but it would ultimately have a negative impact on her that would be lasting, at least for a while. So there's a lesson that she could learn there. Next time, she would probably avoid the brownie and take the strawberries, which ultimately is what I wanted her to do because I knew it was best for her. And I love her unconditionally, so I want what is best for her. My will for her is the best that I could provide to her. But I also want her to learn. I want her to be independent, yes, but also dependent on me because she trusts me, not because I'm forcing her to be. So then why, knowing all that, why does he give us rules to follow? If he gave us the free will, to make the choices, then why does he add rules to it? Basically, because he watched us fall in the biggest way that we could in Eden. And he doesn't want us to continue. He doesn't want to continue to watch us get hurt. So in order to help us stay as close to him as possible, he gave us instruction and commands, help, guidelines, and wisdom. Not to force on us. He doesn't force that on us. And not to hurt us or to punish us with. God gives us law and commands as a gift. And also the wisdom to understand it in the context that he meant for us to have it in. So let's say, this is my example, and I really hope it works, but I think it does. So let's say that you went to a harvest festival, and at the harvest festival, they had a corn maze. Now imagine that this corn maze was built by your father. You're about a couple feet shorter than the top of the corn stalks. So you can't see above them and you cannot climb under them. There are paths, correct and incorrect, like corn mazes have, and you have to go through the maze to get to the other side. Now let's say your father happily sent you into the corn maze, knowing you wanted to go, but without a map. He held the map in his hands and he knew the way in and out of the maze, but he wanted you to have the free will without the rules. So, essentially he's like, have at it, son or daughter. Now you would eventually make it to the other side. You would, but you would likely walk down a lot of the wrong paths first. And, you may trip and fall over vines or whatever is in the maze that you didn't expect, or just got in your way. But he gave you free will to go into the maze without the rules or map in this case. So there you go. Now it's kind of, it's kind of cool thinking about a father sending their child into a maze that they could get lost in and have a hard time finding their way out of without a map. It's like if you were watching it from the sidelines, you'd say, wait, you know the way. Give your son or daughter the map. And, if you had the map the whole time, it could have been a peaceful, joyful, clean, no tripping adventure for you to go from the beginning to the end. And you would have gotten to the end, with success and reward. You would have accomplished the goal if you had the map, though. Now imagine if we're back at the starting point and you begin to enter the field. Now you've taken a few steps into the maze and your father says, now wait, daughter, or wait, son. You may not think that you need this map. You may think that you know how to get through the maze by yourself, but I want you to take it and I want you to follow it. You don't have to, but I love you and I want you to have the best adventure you can have today. I'll see you on the other side. But then, instead of him walking around to the other side, once you've entered the maze, he jumps into the maze with you, just slightly ahead of you so you don't see him, and he got there through a shortcut, let's say. And your father is tall enough to see over the corn stalks and in the maze. So he's basically overlooking the maze and watches you walk through it. He sees you look at the map, but he also sees you take the wrong turn. So from his spot, he calls out and says, son or daughter, that isn't the way. Follow my voice and follow your map. Now, free will is in this picture. The son could ignore the still small voice leading him. The son could ignore the directions given him on the map. But he wants us to make it to the end with the best adventure that we can. So, to follow the rules and follow the directions ultimately ends up with the best result. But it's up to the son. And the father wants the best for him more than anything. He created him after all. Your father, if this is an earthly example, your father created you. And your heavenly Father ultimately created you. And, he desires for us to depend on him and love him in return because we desire to, not because we have to. So after all, if you remember, it was the father in the story that created the maze. He could have planted the corn in a way that the start of the maze went straight through to the finish, to the other side. This would make it impossible almost to do anything outside of the father's design, but it would also make it, no challenge, no adventure, no joy or experience or so on. And it would be empty of the ability to learn to navigate with the tools that the Father who created the maze provided to his children. So at the end of all of this, I want to say that one day, and a day that only God knows, he will make things right again for us on earth. He'll bring an Eden available for all of us. Those who believe in him will stand in this new Eden, in this ideal place, heaven, and we'll have the opportunity to love and cherish and glorify our Father, knowing that, in my story, he is the Father who provided the tools for his son and daughter. And so we see that, and God gives us that map in the laws and in the commands that he provides to us in his word. He doesn't do so. He doesn't command us or present laws to us to make it harder for us to understand how to follow his will or, have free will. He never did it to make it complicated. He did it as a gift. He wanted us to have the tools that we needed to navigate through life with him, dependent on him, listening for his voice to lead us out of, or lead us through, I would say, lead us through life. And the only way that would be, a thing is if he completely unconditionally loved us. And that's what's true. So I hope that answers your question that you sent in. And so to wrap up today's episode, I would encourage you with the scripture found in Isaiah 55:9, and this is from the NASB. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts.